wet or moist than dry. So, and it makes, it's yain, wine, that makes the heart glad. So that's what he was going to get out of the vineyard. And we know the story about Noah, and this comes from Tanchuma, which is Midrash with regard to that. Amar lo hasatan. So, and Satan said to Noah, Utzoncha shedit enu yachad ani v'ata. So, would you like to plant together, you and me? Amar lo hen. And so Noah said to Satan, yes. So they were going to go together in partnership to plant this vineyard. Me'asa hasatan. So what did Satan do? Hevi Rachela ushchita al hagafen. So he brought a ewe, a lamb, and he shechted it upon the vineyard. And after that, Hevi Ari ushchato aleha. After that, he brought a lion, and he also shechted it upon it. Hevi kof ushchato aleha. And then after that, he brought a monkey, and he shechted it. And achar kach hevi chazir ushchato aleha. And after that, he brought a chazir, he brought a pig, and he shechted it upon it.
Ever shechted and pig in the same sentence?
Well, yes, there is that kind of question, huh? Good point. But Tanchuma, what can you say? Perhaps before Shulchan Aruch. So about what could one actually shecht appropriately. So, v'hitiv d'mehem v'hishka v'hem oto hakavu. So, and he held out this example of when one drinks from the vineyard. Ramaz lo, and this is the hint. Kisha adam shote kos achat, and when a person drinks one cup, harehu kal rachela. He becomes, behold, he's like a ewe, a lamb. It's anav ushafal ruach. And so he's humble and meek kind of person. And when he drinks 2 cups, all of a sudden he's like a strong warrior. Ka'ari, like a lion. And he's strong. L'daber gedolot va'omer. And he's strong, and he's speaking, he's doing big speaking, he's boastful. Ma kamuri, who's like me? Kaveh, shata, shalosh, or arba kosot, and then, when he's drinking 3 or 4 cups, miyahu na'asef kakuf, he suddenly becomes like a monkey. So, then, Omed u'merachet u'misachek u'menavel piv livnei hakol ve'ino yodea ma ya'aseh. So then he's standing and he's dancing and he's making fun and making stupid comments that are coming out of his mouth, all of them, and he doesn't even know what he's saying. Shenistaker na'aseh kahazer. So when he gets drunk, he acts like a pig. Mit lachlech, he's dirty. Betit tal ba'asha. So he's dirty and he's covered in mud and with garbage. Okay, so this all is a literary device to indicate what happens when one drinks 1 cup, 2 or 3 cups, and 4 cups, or becomes drunk. So this comes from Tanchuma literature. That's, Monica. Oh, for some reason I thought you might not be here today. And here you are. What a great thing. All right, so this is the impetus, or the information behind last week's faith forum. Thoughts, questions, suggestions?
It's timeless.
800 years or more ago, it's all the same stuff, right?
People behave the same.
Yeah.
kind of amazing. It's contemporary.
Any thoughts?
Why is it Satan that has to deliver this?
Well, what is our like thought with regard to Satan?
Adversary.
Obstacles.
I wanted to ask about the comparative religion point of view. I didn't read last week's whatever. You cited.
Faith Forum, yeah.
Faith Forum, you cited, but I think it's very interesting that people that don't drink according to religion.
Actually, it was interesting in terms of like looking like the Muslim opinion, the Baha'i opinion, or absolutely no alcohol. But the Catholics and the Jews tend to agree on this one. So, and I see you guys are kind of like really in the bright light. How about if we move the table this direction and maybe that'll be a little bit easier so you can read. So let's make sure the camera's okay and it's moving. Is that any better? Is that not working? Okay, because we can scoot over a little bit further. Okay, so if we kind of pick up that end a little bit, because it does roll.
Oh, I see.
It's got rollers underneath?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
in the
it's
center,
rollers.
about only in the
Okay,
center.
so are you guys better now?
Yeah.
Better? Okay. And you guys have like bright light coming over your shoulders so you can breathe anyway. Yeah, if you need to do that, sure.
Well, I find that it's interesting that they use Noah as the example. When in the story of Noah did that take place?
This is Midrash, so Tanchuma's Midrash.
Okay, so.
But this comes after he comes out of the ark. And this is the explanation
So
with
it's not-
regard to, go ahead.
It's not his first time being in bed with the devil. So what's that?
Okay, why is that?
Well, because of his history.
Which is,
His kids saw him without clothes on.
well, this is why.
That was after
he
that, wasn't it?
This would
Right,
be,
right,
this
same
would
time.
precede that story.
Yeah,
And
it
this
is.
would be the explanation
For the
for
story.
the
That's
story.
right.
So this is the Midrash that comes to explain what happened when Noah got out of the ark. Well, the first thing he did was he planted a vineyard.
Okay.
And it's interesting.
I got that.
And it's interesting
You're
that
awfully happy about that.
we have Noah, who is, nonplussed, or it's sort of like no big deal that Satan has like shown up and said, let's go into partnership, let's plant together, b'yachad. And he's like, okay, sure, fine. So, and we know what happens with the rest of the story, in terms of Noah being found in his tent and his, sons trying to cover him up, and they walk backwards to cover their father to maintain his dignity and that kind of thing. But at any rate, so this Satan is providing an example, like a very graphic example in this particular case. And we see Satan in a light where he is actually coming to teach. Okay? So he's coming to teach. Okay?
Do you know why the Muslims believe in no liquor at all?
I actually don't. Do you know?
No, I don't. And also the Mormons too, I guess.
Yes. Yes.
But in Bible, I took out this silly book, The Year of Living Biblically, which is pretty funny, but he inserts serious stuff in it. And he mentions that wine is mentioned 247 times or something like that in the Bible, and 25% are negative or whatever. He gives the percentages of how it breaks down. So you can find in Bible quite a few prohibitions against wine. So Mormons and Muslims obviously found
Pick those, right?
Yes.
So we at least, I suppose we
But
have
it's
picked
just
in
even
terms of
religion.
positive light, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So at any rate, I didn't, I have it somewhere. If you want to look at it later, you're welcome to do that. But I wanted to bring the Midrash behind, because I actually provided that information in the Faith Forum about how ancient literature, the Midrash says, with one becomes like a lamb, one, with two, one becomes like a lion, and then a monkey, and then a pig. So at any rate, that was part of the story. Okay, so, and on that note of Satan being, what we perceive as kind of an enemy and that sort of thing, This is a book that we're gonna be studying, I think prior to Purim, to do like a similar kind of thing that we did with the Gateway to Prayer, and to have a 4-session kind of thing, probably on the Saturday night again. And excellent, wonderful author. She did Eating as Tikkun as one of the little tiny books. She's an Orthodox woman, was a cellular biologist or something like that from Denver, and then moved to Jerusalem in 1981, has been there ever since. So, at any rate, we'll do a similar kind of thing. But since we're obviously not going to be able to get through this whole book, we will not be, reading huge chunks of text. There'll be a PowerPoint and the
Well,
title.
aren't you gonna sell the books in the class?
That could happen. I've bought a few for people who don't have the capability to get it online.
Okay, so in other words, people are encouraged to get them online if they
It's
can.
yeah, like, for
Okay.
the books, Reb Zalman's books, they were not available online, so we had to sell them in class.
Okay.
And there will be some people who don't have computer access.
Right,
So I bought a couple.
okay.
But generally speaking, go get your book.
Okay,
Start
just wanted
reading.
to clarify, because for the gates of prayer, the hearts of prayer, you actually had bought them for the class.
Because they were unavailable otherwise.
Okay,
was that?
so just to make sure that we're not,
Just go to Amazon, they're available, you can get a new, get a used, whatever, and, Schneider, here.
it's on Amazon. Amazon's the cheapest price because I've already looked into,
Options.
right.
Okay, so, do you have a watch?
Yes.
Oh, could you, check on the time for us?
It's
Because
12.
I don't have, a watch, so I need to,
I got this.
whatever. So, all right, so let's start on page 113. So we're going to look at the 39 Melachot, or activities or work, if you will, with regard to Shabbat. So the major categories are called Avot. What are Avot?
Fathers.
Fathers, right? So in this particular case, there are 39 categories. All right, Louis, would you like to start reading? We're on 113 in the italics, and I'll help you out with some of the difficult ones, okay? Mishnah,
Mishnah lists the 39 Melachot forbidden on the Sabbath. These are broad categories extended in later Judaism to cover new inventions and technologies. For instance, the prohibition of lighting fire was extended to cover operating an internal combustion engine and driving a car.
okay, so we have like a global big category, and then through the ages, the sages have interpreted and reinterpreted, okay? Anybody know how we actually got the 39 Melachot to begin with? Okay, what are they based on? What are our avot for these based on? Anyone know about these categories to begin with?
Related to creation?
Good suggestion, but actually, we have to be in the position of whatever it is to know what work is. So it's based on the Mishkan. So when they were creating or building the Mishkan, right, there were things that were done, building, dyeing wool, whatever else you can think of, writing that was necessary. So that's how they got the 39 Melachot to begin with. So go ahead, under the Mishnah.
40 fathers of activity less one are forbidden on Sabbath.
And then we're gonna list these.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Sowing,
Sowing, which is seed, which is different than, we just talked about planting, so a little different. Does anybody know the difference between sowing and planting? Sowing, okay, then what's planting?
Planting's when you're actually lifting the dirt and placing the seed and covering it.
Well, that's a good suggestion. Although my thought, and maybe you're right, is that at least you're bending down to get in there, and maybe you're doing like a tomato plant you're planting, right?
Right.
So you may be
One or the other,
planting
right.
or putting something into the soil that's different than putting a seed. Seeds are sown, but plants are often planted. So, and these are frittering things that
Well,
rabbis
seeds are
talk
sown
about,
like this, but.
So sowing, Although.
Didn't we call it something different last week? There was a different form of casting the seed.
You're gonna have to look that up, because I don't know about that. Anyway, so go ahead. So we have sowing, which, and then it has in parentheses seed there, plowing,
harvesting, gathering into sheaves, threshing, winnowing, sorting, grinding and sifting, kneading, baking, shearing wool from the sheep, bleaching it, snapping off the ends of the threads, dyeing it, spinning, stretching threads across the loom, making 2 loops to fix them to the loom, weaving 2 threads, breaking off the ends of the woven threads, tying knots, loosening knots, stitching 2 threads, tearing material in order to stitch 2 threads, trapping a deer, slaughtering it, filleting it, salting its hide, tanning it, scraping it, cutting it into strips, writing in 2 characters, racing in order to write 2 characters.
Okay, so what's meant by writing 2 characters?
You can write it all, basically.
Say
You
again?
can write 1 character.
Right.
Why can you write one? I didn't know that. You can write one character.
Technically, yes.
Wow.
And this, I mean, just in terms of other Talmud that I've dealt with, it has to do with how the planks were put together. So, like, if they had, the Mishkan had to be put up in a certain way. So apparently they labeled the timber. So A went into, a slot. Slot, yeah, exactly. So you could write 1 character, but you couldn't write 2, which is, it's kind of fascinating how they kind of come up with this sort of how the Mishkan is built.
Building, demolishing, extinguishing fire, lighting fires, the final hammer blow.
Okay, so jump down to the footnote on that final hammer blow, because this is a category that is worthy of a little bit of description.
And carrying from one domain to another.
Footnote there on
She wants to
33.
read number
Diane, could you do
33.
me a favor? Just
Yes, I
come
will.
to that phone.
I will.
Thanks.
I was hoping you could say that.
I brought my 45, can you throw it up in the air? See if
You might be able to get it though, that would be a problem. Okay, so the footnote on 33 is,
Completing of an artifact, the final blow of a cobbler on his last.
okay, so whatever the final completion is, so whatever one is making, the final act of completing it cannot be done, because that's considered work.
Okay, so you could work on something that you're not completing.
Well, we're gonna deal with that in later halachot,
Okay.
but just from this Mishnah, the final hammer blow is the thing that sets it into motion. So there's one piece of Talmud that talks about when does one do the final hammer blow in creating a knife, right? So you do a lot of different things to, maybe wind something around to hold, the hilt, this, that, and the other. But the final piece is this final hammer blow.
When you talk about Mishkan here, this is the first temple
Uh-huh.
built.
Yes, the one that, the portable one, the
Right.
portable one that's
The
out in the
portable,
desert,
okay.
right?
The ark, right? Like in
Right.
The tent.
the Raiders of
What could have been 3 pegs and a cover was much more elaborate.
Yeah, to build the Mishkan, there's a whole series of
Curtains and this and that, what were they carrying up
shark
there?
skin, if I remember.
Actually, I've heard, it was, okay, there's dolphins,
Yeah,
but,
dolphins,
I've really heard, at least according to Art Scroll, it was unicorn
I was gonna
pies.
say that.
Yeah.
But, what do I know? So, anyway, all right, and carrying from one domain to the other, and these are the, quote, 40 fathers less one, so that makes 39 categories. So now we're gonna work on the Gemaras. We're gonna have to flesh these out. What really are each of these categories? Because we don't know. I mean, what do we know about harvesting? When actually does one harvest? So this is the work, the pupil, the, sort of getting in there to figure out what each of these are about. We're not gonna deal with all of them, just a little bit. So, Mike, you wanna pick up Gemara?
Sure. Now the Gemara. Why the number? Rabbi Yohanan says this is to indicate that if somebody did all the activities in one forgetting, he would be liable under each and every heading.
Okay, so why is it 39? It's an interesting question. Rabbi Yochanan is going to come to tell us, okay, so if somebody forgot, didn't realize, he's going to be liable to some kind of offering or sin offering, that kind of thing. In this particular situation, he's thinking, okay, if he's forgetting, he's going to be liable under these categories. So now we're going to talk about what the categories are. First one.
Sowing and plowing.
So those are actually in our Mishnah. Those words are actually there. Now they're going to like define it a little bit.
Surely people plowed first and then sowed. So shouldn't the Mishnah say, plow and then sow? No, the Tana was in the land of Israel, where they sow and then plow a second time.
And lovely, and thank you, Rashi, which, at the bottom footnote there, since the ground is hard, the seed has to be plowed in. Okay, so when we have things that come in order, why don't we have plowing and then sowing? That's the question. Nothing is going to escape, minute examination. They're in an order that maybe they shouldn't be. So that's why they're asking the question. Their response is, okay, the Tanakh who wrote the Mishnah, this is how they did it. They sowed, so they put seed out there, and then they plowed, which doesn't really make sense from an agricultural standpoint, but this is at least the explanation they're going to give. Okay, so next. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, but they plowed twice.
That's the argument.
Right. Because
That's what they're going to say.
You had to plow to break the ground so you could sow. So the seed, then you plowed again so it would cover over, or it continued to break the land up a little bit.
Well, their argument was they were scattering seeds and then they were plowing, so apparently some of it would get into the furrows.
Okay. It was taught sowing, pruning, planting, layering, and grafting are all one category of activities.
Okay, so this is what they're coming to teach us, that sowing and plowing has a lot more to it. There's going to be like major categories and then minor categories underneath of it to take care of anything that might be, quote, work. So in addition to sowing, all of these other things that haven't been mentioned, pruning, planting, layering, grafting, these all fall under the of sowing.
What does this teach us? It teaches us that if someone does many activities that are of a similar type, he is liable only once.
So that's really what they're looking for,
So
is how are they going to make it up if they forgot and they went out and they scattered seed, what are they liable to bring, in terms of like a sin offering?
So if you're going to go out there and really have it in your mind to be bad, you want to
Oh, you have to be forgetting, because that's a different category when you're intentionally doing it. So if one is forgotten, but go ahead, your question.
You want to do all in the same
Category, right,
Take
so
it
you're
to
liable only
the
once.
right.
Fair enough, yeah.
Rabbi said in the name of Rabbi Hia Bar Ashi, pruning renders liable as planting, layering, and grafting render liable as sowing but not planting. Said also sowing.
Yeah. So what they're looking for is, Rabbi Aha is wondering, or he's providing this information, what categories are these in? What should we say? Are they in some different category? Or are they in this category of sowing? So sowing and planting is going to be as the same category, this category of sowing. So planting was not listed, or planting actually, I take that back. Planting is not listed in our very beginning. It says sowing, it doesn't say planting, right? So there's a difference. So they want to be very technical about this, like almost like legalese, let's look specifically. So if I'm not putting a seed in, what if I put in a small tomato plant? Am I still doing something I shouldn't, right? And if I do, what am I liable for? Am I liable for a sin offering? Well,
So it falls in a specific category.
Exactly. So, Monica, you would pick up Rav Kahana said?
Rav Kahana said, if someone prunes and kneads the wood, he is liable twice, once for harvesting and once for planting.
So it's going to make a difference, your intention. So even though all you're doing is pruning, like a tree, but you're pruning the tree not just for the tree itself, but for the sake of gathering the wood, it becomes harvesting as well as
Planting. Rav Yosef said, if someone cuts alfalfa, he is liable twice, once for harvesting and once for planting. Rabbi Abayai said, if someone chops beet leaves, he is liable twice, once for harvesting and once for planting. And plowing, it was taught, plowing, digging, and trenching are all one category of activity. Rav
Sheshet.
thank you, said, if someone removed a mound indoors, he would be liable for building. If outdoors, he would be liable for plowing.
Okay, so get it? There's a difference between which domain you're in. So if you remove a mound of dirt indoors, somehow that's related to building. But if you're doing it outside, it's plowing.
Rava said, if someone filled up a hole indoors, he would be liable for building. If outdoors, he would be liable for plowing. Rabbi Aha said, if someone digs a hole on Shabbat, just because he needs the earth, he is exempt, even according to Rabbi Yudah, who holds that a person may be liable for an activity that is not done for its normal purpose. That would only be if it is constructive, but this is destructive.
Okay, so let's go back and unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
So if somebody's digging a hole on Shabbat because he needs the earth, and then the footnote 38 there says he's not aiming to improve the soil condition as in plowing, okay? He's exempt. Goodness. Okay, I thought we were like just gonna like move that into another room or something.
Well,
But
I
that's
just,
fine. It's
if I
fine.
just give it a quick little touch screen, then it's like
Okay.
quiet.
If you don't mind, just put it outside. Because we've had like at least 5 calls on it, so just put it outside. Shut the door. Thanks. Okay, thank you, appreciate that. All right, so if someone digs a hole, and I apologize, it's my phone, I should have just shut it off. Which
If you tell me how to shut off, I'll just do that.
Just put it outside. We don't need to worry about it.
You're putting your cell phone in a corner or something like that.
Basically, that's exactly it. It should know better than to call during Talmud. Bad cell phone. Bad cell phone. It's liable for something, I'm not sure what. Okay, so
That's also in the Mishnah, but you're in the wrong section.
is that, I'm sure it's in some section of the Mishnah. When one's cell phone defies one, what do you do with it? Yes. If someone digs a hole on Shabbat because he needs the earth, he's exempt. Okay, it's kind of an interesting. It's not muksa, so it's not a forbidden item, but he's needing earth. Now, I can't imagine under what circumstances those are. We'll just leave it at that. So
Probably something occurred where somebody did at one time, and then that came into play.
maybe. Okay,
There's
so
lots of reasons for needing earth.
okay, that
Can you
are
do it on
permissible on Shabbat.
Absolutely.
Okay,
It's pouring down rain, it's starting to knock the foundation of your house off a little bit, and you want to put a pile of dirt out there to divert.
I think you're going to have the argument of the pikuach nefesh under that circumstance, because unless you have it that you're trying to save a life, the foundation of one's home, fixing it on Shabbat is not going to
You
be
stand there
helpful.
and you tell your wife it was Shabbat, and you didn't put dirt out there to keep your house from being knocked over, and that's your life.
Okay, well, I hear your comment, but with regard to specific halakha, that's going to be a problematic argument, a bit of a stretch. All right, so somehow he needs earth, he's exempt. And this other piece here, important piece, there's an activity not done for its normal purpose and or a normal way. So that's yet another method of getting around or creating a loophole when you need one. Okay, so if you're not doing it for its normal purpose and or not doing it in the normal way, it doesn't say that here, I'm just adding that. If you're not doing it in the normal way, it does not become liable under the 39 Melachot potentially. Okay, so Diane, pick up there.
In harvesting, it was taught, harvesting cereals, picking grapes, dates, olives, or figs are all one category of activity. Rava Papa said, if someone throws a clod of earth at a palm and knocks off dates, he is liable twice, once for picking and once for shelling. Rav Ashi said, this is not the normal way of picking or shelling, so he is exempt.
Okay, so do you see what the difference is there, right? Normally, how would you pick dates?
Not throwing clods at them.
Pick them. You just grab them off whatever the tree, right? But instead, somebody is throwing a clod of earth and he's knocking off the dates. So Rav Ashi says he's not liable for breaking Shabbat, but Rav Papa says he's liable not just once, but twice. Once for picking and once for shelling.
Well, what's shelling? A date is a fruit that you would pick and you can eat it like it is. So what's
No,
shelling?
Depends. There's some dates that one can't just eat. Normally, the ones that we see here that would be accurate, not all dates are like that. So, go ahead.
And gathering into sheaves, Rava said, someone who gathers salt from a salt pan is liable as for gathering into sheaves. Abaya said, gathering into sheaves applies only to plants that grow in the soil.
Okay, so gathering is not the same if you're not gathering plants, at least according to Abaya. Rava is saying, you're liable because it's like gathering into sheaves. When I get this impression of what is gathering into sheaves, I think, you got these stalks of corn, that are spent, there's no more corn on them, and you gather this whole corn stalk and you put them all together, right? Here they're calling sheaves from a salt pan. Okay, so salt was
Saying that's equivalent.
apparently that's what they're arguing or stating here. Abaya is saying though, wait, gathering into sheaves is only for plants, not for salt. So like much of Talmud, we have Rabbi A say yes, Rabbi B say no. And they're going to disagree about what they're saying and why they're saying it. And Talmud usually brings minority and majority opinion to bear.
Good thing you didn't have to deal with soybeans.
What would you do?
Yeah, because soybeans you pick by moisture content, whether it's morning or evening. They've got to be picked when they hit that certain moisture content.
Well, kind of like they pick grapes these days by how much sugar content. I don't know that they could have had the same little, unique little instruments to determine sugar content of grapes like we do these days.
They're actually picking the grapes at night now, so they can beat the daytime heats.
Okay?
In threshing, it was taught beating out cereals, flax, and cotton are all one category of activity. Winnowing, sorting, grinding, and sifting. Aren't winnowing, sorting, sifting the same thing? Abaya and Rava both said, activities that took place in the construction of the sanctuary are listed even when similar to one another. Then why not list crushing? Abaya answered, because a poor man eats his bread without crushing the flour. Rava answered, the list is compiled in accordance with the rabbi who said the fathers of activity were 40 less 1, and if you add crushing, there would be 40.
Okay, Rava's argument isn't much of an argument, right? It's like, well, you can't add that because we already have 39. You can't add one more because there'd be 40. And there's only supposed to be 39. That's Rava's argument. But Abaya is saying a little bit different. He says, okay, crushing, we're not going to add it somehow because a poor man eats his bread without crushing. Okay, I'm not sure that that's, going to fly. But the Talmud's going to answer. So go ahead.
In that case, delete one of the others and insert crushing. Abaya's explanation is more plausible. Several Amoraim try to make sense of an enigmatic Tannaitic ruling on sorting. As a literary unit, it is highly stylized and presents in dialogue from discussions ranging over a century or so. The rabbis taught if there were many kinds of foods before him, he may sort and eat, he may sort and set aside, he should not sort, and if he sorts, he is liable to bring a sin offering.
Okay, so that we have to figure out what sorting is. Anybody have any thoughts on sorting? What does it mean to sort?
I took a whole class on sorting.
Ooh, babakasha.
So sorting is the act of putting records into an order.
Records?
Well, records.
How about let's do with M&Ms or
In
something?
the general sense, a data values. So,
Oh, this kind of like computer sorting.
computer sorting.
Would that be like species value, though, if you were to make a comparison? So like if we're talking about food and harvesting and that kind of thing, would it be like sorting out the type of activity?
You know, you sort, if you harvest your grain, you sort by size.
How about if let's pick
Color.
M&Ms. M&Ms have lots of different colors.
Colors.
We've got dreidels, lots of different colors, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but if we're sorting in terms of eating, so sorting often means is that you're gonna put all the blue M&Ms in one bowl, all the green M&Ms in one bowl, right? So that's, in terms of what they're talking about here, sorting.
In the case of food harvesting, sorting is separating the edible from non-edible matter.
Okay, good. Or even if one's on Shabbos and one has like a bowl of nuts, but I only like Brazil nuts. I'm not gonna eat the rest of those nuts, okay? So is that sorting or is that not sorting? Or M&Ms, I only want to eat the blue M&Ms. Am I sorting on Shabbat and doing prohibited work? Okay, so that's the question.
So it could be like having a dinner plate and you only eat a part of what's on the plate of food and you don't touch the rest. You're sorting out the food preference.
That's an
true.
argument. That's an argument. So that this bears
And
much
that would be-
more discussion. I probably have a book that has at least 50 pages on sorting
Mhm.
and various types of
So
sorting.
you go to a friend's house for dinner, or an acquaintance's house for dinner,
And it's Shabbat.
And it's Shabbat, and you sit down, and here they serve you the meal, but in order to be nice and not insult your guest, you're supposed
Your
to eat
host.
it, your host, so
Uh-huh.
you're supposed to eat, but you notice there are some soybeans in there, and you're allergic to soybeans, so you sort the soybeans out so you can eat the rest of it.
Okay.
Now, wouldn't that be exempt though, because you kind of have to do it because you're allergic to it, so it's a health issue?
Well, that. If it's pikuach hanefesh, there's never a problem with that.
Right.
If it has to do with
Just because it's your favorite or you don't like it, then that's a different
That's a
scenario.
Right.
situation, but pikuach hanefesh has a very specific meaning, and that means it's your life. It's not just you don't like it, you get a rash. It's
Mhm.
like it's going to be like anaphylactic shock time
Mhm.
issues, So as long as that's not a problem, that nobody has that issue, okay, then it doesn't count. You have to eat it.
So skin rashes don't count.
Basically,
It's not serious enough.
It's not serious enough, right? The pikuach hanefesh is a very specific halakhic guideline, and so we want to make sure we preserve life. We're hopeful that we
So
preserve
then
health.
if we were to go back to digging the dirt, for that to be exempt, to dig on Shabbat, it has to be extreme.
Well, or one has to, in that particular case, it was he needs it. So
But
it's
that
not
would
like-
have to
but
be
that's a
extreme,
but that's different because we don't know why he needs it.
right? Because they're not telling us. They're
Right,
just
so it doesn't necessarily have
Have
to
to
do
have
with pikuach
meaning.
hanefesh. It may or may not, we don't know. We don't have enough information on the facts.
Mhm.
So I'm not totally sure what sorting is, except in the context of privacy. Okay. If we're non-agricultural people, we're just, city dwellers, what is sort?
Sorting would be picking up blue M&Ms from the M&M pile.
Okay, what about, let's take
It's,
another.
it,
let's take
in
another
Hebrew, it's
example
borer,
that
right?
sounds similar to picking up blue, separating blue and green M&Ms. What about the blue and the red dishes in your refrigerator? The blue ones being the dairy ones, and the red ones being the meat
Yeah.
ones. So shouldn't that be an activity that's necessary because,
Sure.
I'm going to put out lunch, I think I'll be a dairy, so pick some blue things.
Absolutely, that is correct.
Okay.
That it's different than having all of them in the same thing and ready to eat, because essentially there are many kinds of food beforehand, and it has to do with food. So more specifically, like as in like edible, like plates are not edible, so we're moving into something that's really specifically edible.
Specific to edible.
Here, yes. But I actually should have brought like my halakhic guideline book on like the 1,000 different issues on borer, so we could like have a better discussion.
If you go through and you put back beans, it doesn't have to be soybeans, but normally if you harvest any beans in the process of harvesting, stones and other items are picked up with it. So
Right.
in order to, you have to sort the non-food items out before you can those Judaism.
True, and there's gonna be a difference that we're gonna see in a minute, whether it's a sieve or a funnel or your hands. Okay?
But the interesting thing to me here is that Tanaim already spent 200 years talking about it, and now here Amoraim are going to spend another 200 years discussing it and writing in discussion.
And we're still talking about it. So for 2,000 years, we've been talking a lot about this sorting thing. And honestly, this is just one of the Melachot. I mean, it's just one, but there's a lot to it. So actually, maybe for next week, I'll try to bring, more concrete, specific examples. But let's get through the Talmud on this, so we can have that discussion maybe next week about whatever. So, Ula, let's see, Judy.
Ula said, this is what it means. He may sort and eat for that day. He may sort and set aside for that day. For the next day he should not sort, and if he has sorted, he's liable to bring a sin offering.
Okay, so there's a difference, right?
Yeah.
If he's eating it right now, fine, or eating it sometime on Shabbos, okay. But if he's sorting it and going to eat it on Sunday, on Yom Rishon, can't do that. What if he does it?
He brings a sin offering.
Okay, so that's what it says.
That's his objective. Is it permissible to bake for that day or to cook for that day? So said Rav, is that it means he may sort and eat less than the measurement. 41, there is
Yeah.
a fixed measurement for each activity below which there is no liability for infringing on Shabbos.
Right, so with everything, there's a threshold. So,
Like walking within the town.
exactly,
Like
there
walking
right,
outside
so if you're over the
town.
200 Avot, okay, that's a different story than if you're walking within your area.
Okay, he may sort and eat less than certain measurement. He may sort and set aside less than the measurement. Over the measurement, he should not sort, and if he has sorted, he's liable to bring a sin offering. Rav Yosef objected. Is it permitted to bake less than the measurement? So said Rav Yosef, it means he may sort and eat by hand. He may sort and set aside by hand. If with the funnel or on a plate, he should not sort, and if with a sieve or sifting basket, if he sorts, he is liable to bring sin offering. So no two. Rav Hamuna objected. Does it say anything about funnel or plate? So said Rav Hamuna, it means he may sort and eat food out of waste. He may sort and set aside food out of waste, but by removing waste from food, he should not sort. And if he sorts, he is liable to bring a sin offering.
Okay, so Rav Hamnuna has a particular thought on this. He says, if one has rotten apples and good apples, you can sort food out of waste. So you can take the good apples out of whatever it is. You can even take those good apples and set them aside, but you can't take the rotten apples out and leave the good apples. Because that's the third piece, right?
Okay, but you can take the good apples out of the rotten apples, but you can't take the rotten apples out of the good apples.
Right.
On a practical basis, you can sort that which you're going to consume on that one day.
Arguably, if you're talking about tachlis final bottom line, what we're just doing now is providing like argument here, argument here, argument here, argument here, with a utensil, without a utensil, on that day, later that day. I mean, we're bringing a lot of different categories to bear. And your comment was on a practical level, which means the bottom line for today's halachot, that's what I heard.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a similar kind of thing. So if you only love blue M&Ms, arguably you can take the blue M&Ms out, but you can't take all the other colors, the orange and the green and the brown, and leave the blue. Okay, because that would be akin to the waste argument of Rob. But we're going to deal with that. I think we'll talk about that more next week, because I can tell that this is like, what are you talking about sorting? What? And why would you do that, right?
The bottom paragraph is very.
Yes, please. Have I objected?
I mean, this is also another. Abai objected doesn't say anything about food out of waste. So said Abai, means he may sort and eat for immediate consumption. He may sort and set aside for immediate consumption, but for later in the day, he should not sort. And if he has sorted, he is like one who sorts for storage and is liable to bring its sin offering.
Okay, so Abaya is taking it that next level, saying, wait a second, what are you doing? You're sorting it for later in the day. You shouldn't do that. Okay, we're having a lot of different opinions about this same issue. Okay.
The disciple reported this to Rava, and he said, "Not mine spoke well."
Okay. All right. So we will pick this issue of sorting back up next week when we still have like 5 minutes. So should we like continue on a little further?
This is very
The last-
interesting paragraph here.
It is
Yeah, I like
lovely.
it.
It's lovely. Okay, so let's go on. Alan, you want to pick up there?
Over preoccupation with law may divert attention from the beauty and spirituality that characterize the Sabbath. The following sugya reminds us that the meticulous regulations constitute a structure to safeguard and focus its spiritual essence and beauty. The term Oneg Shabbat, Sabbath delight, perfectly articulates what the Sabbath means to the observant Jew. The spiritual is achieved not in opposition to the material, but through the celebration of God's material creation.
Okay, so one actually observes Shabbat through the material, which means when we eat, we're going to eat well. You know, when we do something for Sabbath, we're going to do it and have it be beautiful. You know, Hidur mitzvah. Okay, do you want to go ahead and read? We might get through at least the rest of the
Gemara.
page.
Rabbi Simeon ben Pazi said that Rabbi Joshua ben Levi, and in the name of Bar Hapara, whoever celebrates the Sabbath with 3 meals will be saved from 3 calamities.
Okay, so 3 meals. What's the big deal? We always eat 3 meals, right? What's the footnote say?
People normally only eat 2 meals a day.
Okay.
So which one do they skip?
They would have like something early and then usually something like midday. I mean, there's discussions at least that I know of about workers in the field and can they eat, during the time that they're working.
So actually, sheep is the
So actually, sheep is the third meal. So that would be like the dinner time thing, which we probably none of us really need, right? I mean, what do you do with that? So, yeah. But people used to eat only 2 meals. So anybody who really is celebrating Shabbat, doing it with 3 meals, is going to be saved from 3 calamities, which are Hevelei Mashiach. Go
The
ahead.
birthplace of Messiah, the judgments of Gehinim, and the war of Good and Magog.
God, I think it's actually Gog and Magog, but anyway.
Of God.
It says God, but I'm pretty sure that they mean Gog and Magog.
Okay. And the birthplace of Messiah and
Birth pangs or Hevelei Mashiach.
and Messiah. For the Sabbath it says, remember the Sabbath day, and of the birth pangs of the Messiah. And it says, I will send Elijah the prophet to you before the coming of the awesome, fearful day. For the judgment of Gehinom, or of the Sabbath it says, remember the Sabbath day, and of the judgment of Gehinom it says, that day shall be a day of wrath. And the war of God and well, it says God. And
I know it
God.
says that, but anyway. Keep going.
Or of the Sabbath it says, remember the Sabbath day, and of the war in God. And God says, on that day when God sets foot on the soil of Israel.
Okay, so those are their texts that they want to bring forward and say, if you're celebrating with 3 meals, these are the 3 calamities. Okay, that's what he's come up with. That's what his position is. So Rabbi Yochanan.
Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Yosef, whoever makes a Sabbath of delight will enjoy an unbounded heritage, as it says, when you delight in the Lord, I will set you astride the heights of the earth, and will let you enjoy the heritage of your father Jacob. That is not like the heritage of Abraham, to whom it was said, up, walk about the land, through its length and its breadth. Not like the heritage of Isaac, to whom it was said, I will assign all these lands to you and your heirs. But like the heritage of Jacob, of whom it was written, you shall spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. Okay. Rabbi Nachman bar Isaac said, whoever makes a Sabbath a delight will be saved from the suffering of exile. Here it is written, I will set you astride the heights of the earth. And there it was written, and you will tread upon their high places. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav, whoever makes the Sabbath delight will be granted the desires of his heart. As it says, take delight in the Lord, and he will grant the desires of your heart. I would not know what delight is meant here, but when it says, you shall call the Sabbath a delight, you must say, this refers to the Sabbath delight. How do you make it a delight? Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rav Shmuel Bar Shalat, said in Rav's name, with a dish of beet, a big fish, and the finest garlic.
Okay, for them, that was like a great meal. That was like their Shabbat meal. I know that, like, one of the things in my master's thesis I worked on was food in terms of like tikkun and eating and that kind of thing. And it's fascinating. I mean, even if you track the art from the first times that they had portion sizes to now, and essentially our portion sizes when we look are about 200% at least of what they were eating, or at least one assumes that they were eating in the Middle Ages. So it's kind of interesting. So the dish of beet, big fish, and finest garlic, for them is like a fabulous Shabbat meal. That's what they've got, and they're going to celebrate through the material and make Shabbat a delight. So, and go ahead and finish that little paragraph there.
Rav Chia Bar Ashi, in Rav's name, even a small thing, if you make its honor the Sabbath, is a delight. What, for instance, Rav Papa said, a cup of kafsana, which is a small fish found among the rocks.
So apparently that was something pretty fabulous too. All right, so let me just get up to the next italics section here because we have just a little bit left. Rav Chia Bar Abba said, when someone observes the Sabbath properly, he can be forgiven, even if he serves idols as the generation of Enosh. As it is said, happy is Enosh who does this, who keeps the Sabbath and does not profane it. Do not read Mechal Lo, does not profane, but Mahul Lo, he is forgiven. So they're changing the word a little bit and making the explanation. Rav Yehuda said in Rav's name, if Israel had kept the first Sabbath, no nation or tongue could have prevailed against them. It is said, yet some of the people went out on the seventh day to gather. Oops, that was when they were in the desert. We were talking about the manna. And following that, Amalek came and fought with Israel. So their argument is if Israel had kept the Sabbath, they would have done well, and Amalek would not have come. And these are their texts for that. Now the next piece is like one of the most famous pieces that you'll hear frequently. Okay. Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, if only Israel were to keep 2 Shabbatot properly, they would be redeemed forthwith, as it is said. As for the eunuchs who keep my Sabbaths, then I will bring them to my sacred mount. Okay. Rabbi Yossi said, may my portion fall among those who enjoy 3 meals on the Sabbath. Rabbi Yossi has a collection of sayings, and we're going to deal with that next week, but this piece here at the very top of 119, if only Israel were to keep 2 Sabbaths, they would be redeemed. Okay, that's where this comes from, famous section, famous word. If Israel just keeps 2 Sabbaths, there's redemption. Okay, Toda Rabba, thank you so much. And next week, see you at noon. Louis, thank you for coming. It's kind of hard to jump into a class where people have been